Peace. Today is Saturday, July the 6th, 2019. My name is Kufu Aku Mentuhotep, and I am co-founder of the Raising Awareness Group. Here alongside with my other co-founder, Mku MZ. And today we have a very special guest with us today. We have Dr. Iya Adjua Hetheru, and she authored this great book, which I have here in front of me, called African Cultural Consciousness, Leadership, Awareness, Instructional Model. And the subtitle is Act to Claim the Minds of the African Youth. So we're very privileged and honored to have us here with us today. So right now, we're going to hand the floor over to Dr. Adjua and let her briefly run through her bio, her background, her educational experience, and what led up to the book. And then we got some good questions for her that we're going to get into. So we're going to hand the floor over to her.
What's up, everyone? I'm Dr. Iya Adjua Hetheru. Born, raised, and educated via my grandfather, my mother, my grandmother, my family members, the community that raised me, and lastly, Philadelphia public schools. And I'm also I'm a PhD in African American Studies from Temple University. And like I said, born and raised and educated in North Philly. Today's date is 6 IPET, 13,019 or 6259, because we always want to think in African time. And I'm honored to be here today, speaking with these two good brothers. It's been a long time coming, so glad we finally got our dates and times together so we can collaborate and share information about ACCLAIM, which is an excellent book. All educators of African youth should have this book. All schools that identify as African-centered should have this book. I am 2+ decades an educator. I'm still an educator. I specifically educate African people, and they educate me because education is a reciprocal process. It is an interchange and exchange of information. So although I've taught many youth, they've taught me as well. And you can always tell the impact that you have as an educator on teaching people, especially youth, because they never forget what you teach them.
That's right.
And they never forget you.
Yep.
And the love is always so real, so I'm always so honored. Every time I see my students out in the street, I have my phone on me, we take pictures together, and and it's always big love. And so, it's always a reminder that I'm doing the work that I was sent here to do by my ancestors. So, like I say, I'm born, raised, and educated in Philadelphia, all pre-K to grade 12 public school. And then from there on to a vocational school. I initially sought to be a dentist. So I went to...
didn't know that.
Yeah. So I went to Dobbins Vocational Tech, and I got my certificate as a dental assistant. Unfortunately, the job market was not kind to me, so we went on to the next thing. Went back to school, and went to Temple University, where I started out as pre-med because the idea was still to be a dentist. So because, how the Philadelphia public school system is set up, if you don't have a strong science background, it's hard to get it by the time you're, an adult. So I struggled in the science area. So I went to community college and I took some science classes so that I could transfer from Temple pre-med into Thomas Jefferson University dental hygiene program, where I was going to get my Bachelor's of Science in Dental Hygiene. So that didn't work in my favor either. So I moved on to the next thing, went back to Temple. They accepted all of my credits, and I went into education. So I have a Bachelor's of Science in Early Childhood Ed, and I have a Master's in African American Studies and a PhD in African American Studies. And the entire time that I was doing my 3 degrees, I always worked and, took care of my family. So I am a cultural warrior, activist, family person, wife, mother, sister, cousin, warrior queen sister. Shout out to my entire sisters, they know who they are. And I would say that the latest project that I'm working on, honored to be working on, is with the Sankofa Artisans Guild, where we are putting together reusable feminine products for girls in the Gambia and Kenya. Okay. And I'm advocating that we also do that for the girls here in America, because that hopefully will help decrease some of the fibroids that we as African women experience in our lifetime. So I am the author of ACCLAIM. It's actually my dissertation. It took me a minute to put it into book form, and I'm so happy that it's here. And I advocate that the ACCLAIM model is a model that should be used in all schools that identify as African-centered, and in all programs where African children are being educated and exposed to information with the African knowledge base.
Very well put.
Excellent, excellent. We're glad to have you here.
Thank you so much.
So right now that she's given us her bio, and she has a great background, and I'm once again just honored to have her here. We compiled some questions for Dr. Adjua, and so we're going to get into some of the questions. I'll start off with the first question. So in your book, ACCLAIM, it was stated that, in quote, Malik Adams notes the distinction in the necessary Afrocentric education that will encounter an inferiority complex in African youth, reversing its effects, noting that no progressive thinking person would deny its benefits to African children. Can you expound on this quote for further clarification?
Okay, so yes, the quote as written states the necessary Afrocentric education will counter an inferiority complex in African youth, reversing the effects of European information that's given to our children on a daily basis. Now, my initial inspiration for ACCLAIM, Act to Claim the Minds of African Youth, stems from the works of Anna Julia Cooper. I talk about that in chapter 2 of ACCLAIM, in the Lit Review, where she discusses that concept of beneficence related to African youth. She says that the African community should teach our youth to do that which is best for themselves first. African people, we're always taking care of everyone else. However, that's rarely, if ever, reciprocated. And so we have to teach our children to take care of themselves first. And in taking care of themselves first, that means to take care of their families and their communities that have produced them. So the idea of taking care of themselves first, then sharing their human wealth with their fellow humans, is of necessity for African people in general and African youth in particular. In taking care of themselves first, African youth should take care of their families from which they come, further reinforcing the continual existence of African people. And so, yes, I advocate that we have to tell our children who they are. If we don't tell them who they are, other people will, and it won't be nice. Yeah. For the most part. No one can deny that African people are the paradigm for most of humanity. Because I say most of humanity because we have these living entities that exist and look like they're human, but some of the things that humans do are not not human. You know, so that's why I say most of humanity. So I don't want African people to take on that, be responsible for that. No, we're not responsible for that inhumanity that that some people that look like humans participate in. So we built the stage, we built the props, we built the scripts for that which is considered human. We've done that. Afrocentric education promotes this worldview of African people and our life experiences. It's how some actors, African people, parents, elders, all involved in education, educating African youth, is how it's interpreted, and how the script is written, how the actors, who are the human beings, present themselves on the stage of life that can be problematic. For instance, being ignorant of African knowledge, being insincere in the presentation of African knowledge, and encouraging African youth to exist as marginalized people. That's not good. That's not what we need for African youth. But if you are a person and you're existing in a marginalized state, like, you don't even realize that this is what you're doing when you're telling children to exist in that manner as well. So in this sense, our children need cultural ammunition to counter the continuing onslaught, murder, incarceration, mental, physical abuse they face on a daily basis. Like, they have to be prepared for that. You can't just send them out into the world and, you know, just let things happen to them by happenstance, because that's not what's occurring. You know, things are intentionally done to African people and African children. So for a long time now, it has been from the womb to the tomb. I quote Malik Yakini regarding the continual survival of African people worldwide. So parallels of Afrocentric education must exist to counter the fight forward, the intergenerational cultural transmission, quoting from Carruthers and Hilliard, of knowledge necessary for the continued survival of African people. So I recommend that as an adult, or you are older than an African child, that whatever you're teaching them, that you know that information first, that you've internalized it and digested it first before you present it to them, because they will find the cracks. And once they find that you don't know what you're talking about, you're dismissed. They don't hear you. They might not even see you anymore after that. So you have to know what you're talking about when you talk to African children and you are teaching African children.
And what makes it even worse? Excellent answer to the question. But what makes it worse? And as you were talking, and most of the time these interviews just make my brain go 1,000 miles a minute.
Right.
But I happened to capture one of those thoughts that went by. And I was talking to Kufu not too long ago about, and I also put a post up. I reflected a thought in a post or a comment saying that I would hate to be a parent when their children gets of age and they come to them and ask them, "Mommy, Daddy, how come you did not tell me this stuff?" And then I would love to be a fly on the wall to see that. You know, we're getting of an advanced age now where we start to see some revelations and things of that nature, start to see some changes. But I would love to see these younger kids now, even Kufu at his age. He even told me that he would hope his parents would have told him some things. But luckily he came into an elder like me and I saved his life. No, I'm only joking, guys.
That's an 80% true statement. I'll give him 80%.
But I would love to, so the message is very clearly, if you're a parent, you have a responsibility to bring yourself up in the culture, in the knowledge, as best as you can. Even fake it if you have to, if you don't believe it, because your children need to be armed with this information. Because just like I'll come out of the recovery field too, of addiction. We act like addicts sometimes. When the kid goes out into that world looking for something to fill that space, and they can't understand why is it? What is something that's missing?
Right.
And you talked about that in your answer. What is it that is missing? And the first thing they do is they see these European ideals and European habits and say, okay, that looks good, that feels good, I can have fun doing that. And next thing you know, they've replaced this European deprivation with the African culture that should be inside them.
Exactly.
So I felt you when you answered that question.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry to take over, but
No, I think it was a very good question. And just to kind of veggie back, we don't like to say piggyback, we like veggie back off what he said. I as a parent feel it's very imperative to not only teach your children about African-centered education, but also expose them to the culture, putting them in environments that are cultural. Here in Philly, we have a Doom Day and certain events and, African-centered scholars, and putting the children in front of them and letting them absorb the experience, because the best way they're going to learn is by having those experiences in real time. So I'm a big advocate for that. And I truly believe that's what we need to begin to do. So anytime there's events and things that's happening around the city or in various surrounding cities, get your children out to the events. If it's child appropriate, of course, and expose them to the people. That's the best way for them to learn. And then when they get a book like ACCLAIM, they'll be more acceptable to reading it, because they didn't experience the culture, the people, they had a good time, so they have a good feeling about the information that's contained within the context of whatever book that's in front of them. So they'll be more receptive to it. So I would add that on to what y'all said, is just get the children out and let them experience the culture.
Very good.
Take them, to events, drumming, dance, and let them get the full experience of things in cultural context. Every other group of people, various different cultures, they do the same things. So we need to begin to follow suit and do the same things with our children. Very good answer. I appreciate your answer. So I'm moving on to the next question. So in your book, ACCLAIM, it mentions Dr. Molefe Kete Ashanti's Afro-cultural theory. What is the Afro-cultural theory? Also, why was it important to add this into your book?
So, Afro-cultural theory is proposed by Dr. Molefe Asante as an explanation of the various phenomena associated with African cultural practices and behaviors. It's an important add to my book ACCLAIM because it, ACT, African Cultural Theory, is dedicated to comprehending the behaviors, traditions, customs, and rituals of African societies, all of which affects the developmental consciousness of African people. The developmental consciousness of African people is their worldview, or the African worldview. And discussing and applying the African worldview to multiple aspects of knowledge, sharing with African youth, consistency is important. Your children or whoever you're talking to, they're going to ask you why. Like, you must have an answer for the why. And then your answer has to make sense. So I advocate that when we take our children to cultural events, we have them around cultural groups and people, we also have to tell them why we're here, why we are going to these events, and why we participate in certain holidays, and in certain holidays we don't participate. I'm speaking from experience because I definitely had that conversation with my son and my daughter, especially a big one for them was All Hallows Eve or Halloween, And so I had to explain to them why we don't participate in that, and also misgiving, we don't participate in that, and Xmas, that's not what we do. In our family, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is what we're going to do. So I always ran a matriarchy in my household with my children. So if you are interchanging and exchanging teaching, learning, information with African youth, you must know what you're talking about, or else the information will be dismissed from their minds. Any inconsistencies or falsehoods, like I don't advocate for faking it.
Right.
You know, any inconsistencies or falsehoods will be challenged, and if you lose, you will mentally lose them also. If you win, however, they become lifelong learners who never forget what they have learned from you or taught you, because it's a reciprocal process. So we can't afford to take such chances. So the motto to walk your talk is essentially mandatory. Like, you could talk all day to your children.
That's true.
And everything, and young adults, people that you engage with,
Right.
but people watch what you do.
That's true.
So you always have to walk your talk, and you have to consistently walk your talk. You know, if you're speaking with African youth about the African worldview, you should be living the African worldview, or at least attempting to live the African worldview. We live in these Yoruba hinterlands, so it's a little, challenging at times to incorporate the African worldview into our lifestyle as consistently as we should and need to, But the point is to try, and the point is to always be of that mind frame of the idea of the African worldview in terms of incorporating it into everything that you do. This is like I talk about African time. I speak as many African languages, even though it might be just greetings, I say it, as much as I can, because again, language is culture. And so as I was saying, as we exist in these Yoruba hinterlands, it can be quite challenging to abide by the African worldview due to numerous distractions and the constant pulling of African people into marginalized states of existence. We have to remember, perception this is where a lot of our fellow human groups benefit from us being in marginalized states of existence, not knowing who we are, being on the outside looking in. No, that's not what we need. So this is why it's highly necessary that we demand of those in our African families who engage our African youth as African cultural leaders that they are fully conscious of the African origins of the information and knowledge that they interchange and exchange with our African youth. It's because they are the future right now. Like, you're looking at them, they the future right now,
And I want to put on the record that I stand corrected. You're right. There's no faking this thing.
Can't fake
So I want to take back what I said a little earlier before you was asked that question.
Yes.
So it is important. I think the most important thing, I guess what I was trying to convey is get started.
Yeah, get started.
And get to educate yourself so you can teach your kids.
That's right.
So yeah, that faking thing's not going to work. I absolutely agree with you.
You do what you can. You train.
Yeah.
You might have to transition and transform with your children
Right
or
alongside
with
them.
your
Yep.
family members. That's
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
That's all right. Okay, we used to do that. Now we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And this is why we don't do that anymore. This is why we do things this way now.
Yep.
That's okay. Because nothing is static. Nothing remains the same.
Very good answer. The part about your answer that stood out to me, MQ probably know, when you say there's a reciprocal process, and MQ knows because we talk almost every day. I'm real big on reciprocity. That's a moral principle in my eye.
Yep.
So I believe in being reciprocal. This is why I believe my relationship with Elder MQ is so good, because when we talk with each other, when we build, it's not really an age thing. It's more reciprocal. And we never treat each other like with the age difference. He never treats me like, oh, I'm your elder, so I know more than you.
Sometimes I put a card though.
Yeah, sometimes he pulls a card, and it's okay. And I'll give that to him.
Yeah.
But it's things where he might be lacking, and then I'll give him the information.
Exactly.
And I'll build him up.
Exactly.
And he's receptive to that information.
Yep.
And he's very thankful in the same way, because obviously he has more life experience than I do. So when I bring him life issues, and he might explain things that he might have been through that's similar, I'm very receptive to it as well. So that's the reciprocal process. is something that's
Very,
lacking in
very
our
important.
community.
Very important.
You know, you have a big gap, and I'm always speak on this. We have a big gap between elders and youth, where elders feel like the youth is hard-headed, doesn't listen, and then the youth feels like the elders are too smart for their own good and don't care about them anyway. So we have to begin to bridge that gap. So I try to use our relationship as the model. I don't really like to say that, but I tell people, I say, you know, if you want an example, look at how we interact with one another. And when it comes to learning, and this just goes back to the learning process, being reciprocal with your children. I learn stuff from my children every day, and it's things that I didn't know about myself until I had children. And I look at them and I see how they're learning.
Very good.
And I see their appetite for knowledge and stuff.
Yep.
And then that really made me understand that I can be a good leader, a good teacher, and those are things that I didn't believe or know about myself. Other people have told me this, but it took for me to have children to understand that and really grasp it, like, okay, well, I got no choice but to be a leader now, you know. So, and then it really tested my leadership skills and my teaching abilities to the point where I was like, oh man, I think I'm, you know, not to toot my own horn, but I think I am a pretty good leader, you know, and I think I am a pretty good teacher, you know. Obviously, my daughter is the eldest of my two children, but she really takes a real attentive manner when it comes to me instructing her to do things. She's a very quick learner. So her being a very quick learner, I'm like, okay, like, you know, I got to be on top of my game. So I appreciate what you said with the reciprocal process, and I take that true to heart. So I'll let them
Okay.
ask you the next question.
All righty. Okay, Dr. Iya Adjua, in your book ACCLAIM, and which on page 32, it was stated that various African-centered scholars agreed that the only way to counter the miseducation of African youth is to center them in the reality of human knowledge according to the life experiences of our elders and ancestors. Can you give us some detail on how this should happen?
So, I mean, in addition to reading, internalizing, knowing the life stories and experiences of African people, African-centered or Afrocentric instructional leaders, teachers, Wazazi parents, elders, all Africans who are engaging in the mental development of African youth must be able to apply the life experiences of Africans from the past to the Africans before you in your audience or classroom, whoever it is you engaging with. You know, you must set the example by role modeling how your thoughts determine your speech and then reflects upon your action. This is what Jedi Shamsu Jehudi Jacob Carruthers refers to as the three essences of humanity. Centering African youth, where you, the three essences of humanity is when you think before you speak, before you act. This, you can teach a 2-year-old this. Think before they speak, before they act. You know, you can have them recite that, show them what that looks like, and ask them to give you examples of that. And that will, you know, help them, you know, to internalize it and to always be in that mind frame. And it'll save them a lot of time and energy and, you know, possibly getting into trouble about things, you know. So centering African youth in the life experiences of our African ancestors and elders may be achieved by educating African youth in the knowledge of African value system, or AVS, and then guiding them and applying the components to their daily life. So for instance, applying the three essences of humanity alone will surely save the lives of many of our African youth, because thinking before you speak and then acting will eradicate numerous rash thoughts, words, and deeds that our youth end up incarcerated, abused, and or murdered for in the end of various situations. You know, so this is just a way to kind of slow them down in terms of something that they may be doing that may possibly bring them harm. So another African value system, which many in the cultural conscious African community are familiar with, is the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. So we can strongly imagine the righteousness which our African youth would endure if these principles are applied via parent expectations on a daily basis. Now, Wazazi parents, you can't apply this. Adults, African family, you cannot apply the 42 admonitions of Ma'at if you're not applying them to yourself first.
Right.
Because your children, youth will see through that. Okay? So it can't be something that you put on your youth and not apply to yourself. Okay? So similarly, this same thing can occur with the 10 KV or the 10 Kemetic virtues. Asa Hilliard shares that with us. The Afrocentric Creed. All of these are African value systems that are in the appendices of ACCLAIM. So Afrocentric Instructional Leaders, Bazazi parents, elders, these are all Afrocentric instructional are not just teachers and principals, okay? So it's part of the family, all right? They will have quick access to them to expose, discuss, and reinforce these forms of knowledge based on African life experiences. But you can't do it if you are not applying it to yourself. You have to apply it to yourself as well. That's when it has the most effect.
Okay.
Okay? So I find, I wrote my answers out. Okay, so again, ACCLAIM in the appendices are African value systems that you can use. Start with the age grade statements. Hold your child accountable to whatever statement is in their age range, but you also have one in your age range. So that you can say, okay, so this is what mommy or daddy has to do, and mommy and daddy want you to do this, you know, and I'm going to do this, okay? And they might not know what it is that you have to do. Again, you have to break that they comprehend what it is you have to do, and it will also motivate them to do what they have to do to meet the expectations of their age grade statement. This is in the appendices of ACCLAIM.
Okay.
Powerful book.
So just briefly say your answer. What was the overall?
For the last question?
Yeah.
Okay, so whatever expectations you have for your child or African person that you are interchanging and exchanging information with, teaching, learning, that's a reciprocal process. You must also have those expectations of yourself. And in terms of being committed to the child, to the person that you're teaching. Be committed to them and they will be committed to you. So this is, my students all the time, they would see me in different parts of the city and I would have on the African attire. It's like, oh, you dress like that all the time? Like, yes, I dress like this all the time. Or, they'll see me in the market. I've even been in Atlantic City and I had a student call me from way down the boardwalk and run up to me. I can't believe you still got on African attire. Like, yes, I still have on African attire. Or I'm carrying books, or I'm reading, or, never catching me like out of line. Not that I'm gonna be caught, because I don't do things out of line.
Right.
I'm always decent and in order, as I ask them to be decent and in order. Walk your talk.
Exactly.
When you walk your talk, they will walk their talk with you, side by side.
Yeah, I agree. Our Seba, or one of our Sebas, Infadishi Jehudi Mas. And I think every time we went to go see him, we never seen him dress anything that wasn't cultural aspect. So it goes to what you're saying, basically walking the talk. And there's nothing wrong with that. When I walk around cultural attire, people always ask me where am I from? And of course, my first answer is, is to kind of be a little bit of a smart aleck. So I tell people I'm from Africa. And people are like, where from? And I'd be like, no, I was born here. But but it just gives people that sense of, just because I was born here does not mean that I cannot dress cultural appropriate. So I agree, centering yourself and walking the talk, because we can't be out here teaching the people and instructing the people to live their life in a certain manner and context if we're not doing it ourselves. So we just have to be the example and lead by the example. So very, very good answer.
Take this one. Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty. The claim is the star for the day. From a star. Okay. In your book, The Claim, you make reference to, and I was interested in this as well, and we're also going to talk about the Afrikanographer later on in our questions.
Yeah.
But you make reference to Afrikanographer's interpretation. We understand that it is critical in vetting those who will be in contact and teaching our youth. Explain what is an Afrikanographer's interpretation, and how was it instrumental in the process of your book?
So an Afrikanographer is a scholar who records and writes the African experience from an Afrocentric perspective. So in reference to ACCLAIM, I am the Afrikanographer who recorded and wrote about the African life experiences of the African female scholars who founded the alternative education schools who are part of this research endeavor. Afronography was instrumental in the process of writing ACCLAIM because it allowed me to clarify the positions of the founders in regards to the establishments of this school. While there was a practitioner of a major religion, there were also additional practitioners of African traditional religion, ATR, in this research endeavor. The African worldview was acknowledged and identified by a majority of the founder respondents. However, there was little to no application of the African worldview in the school's daily practices, probably because many of the facilitator or teacher respondents were practitioners of so-called major world religions. So the obvious incongruency between Western religious practices and implementation of the African worldview became quite obvious. Additionally, interference from the state had a grave impact on the freedom ideas that could have resulted if the schools were truly free to expose African youth to ATR, African traditional religion. Unfortunately, this was not the case, as home families and school families do not collaborate on these kinds of ideas due to habitual ideas regarding the separation of church and state. So, like, you couldn't come into a school that identifies as African-centered and is getting money from the state. Like, you can't come in there and do a voodoo workshop. Right? Because you could, but you'll hear from the state. Because one of the parents will report it to the state. But however, you could have a reverend come in and speak to the children. You could have an imam come in and speak to the children.
That's interesting.
You could have Jehovah's Witness come in and speak to the children. But if you do African traditional religion, any aspect of it, they come in, outside of just generally exposing them or whatever, it could be problematic.
Right. And it's interesting you say that because we heard before, we won't get into naming, but we've heard even in certain charter schools that might be African-centered, you can't perform certain rituals like libations and things like that, where you might have certain parents that might take an issue to those things, and that's why I believe it's very imperative that even if you have your child in, of course, the public school system, or even a charter school that's African-centered, to also make sure that you're educating them at home, giving them the full context of the cultural education that they might not be getting or lacking. Even if they go to African-centered school, they might not be getting the full context because of certain things that might be in place. So once again, I believe it goes back to the parents to, once your children get home, if they're not fortunate enough to be homeschooled, get back home, go through the curriculum, go through the homework, see what's being taught, and then adding to that. Or you might have to make corrections. Say, look, I know this is what they're teaching you, but let me teach you what's really real. So you do their work, but you're going to do this work.
That's right.
You're going to get the real work when you get home.
And this is why you're doing it. This kind of work.
Right.
You always have to tell them the why. So.
Okay. I want to do a follow-up on that question. As you were talking about that, my question, even before I got here, was that we're talking about a methodology. We're talking about something that's clearly in a model of a scientific model. We're talking about afronography. So I guess my question is, can it be considered science? But let me read out of. I know that you are a proponent of Melefe Asante's work. In his book, Encyclopedia of Black Studies, he talks about afronography. And the one passage out of here, and anybody's interested, page 76, afronography, a key factor in being a researcher in the contemporary world has to do with appreciating the centrality of human agency. No researcher understands this more than the adequately trained Africological researcher who seeks to explore the best ways to know something and then to be able to explain what he or she knows. The Africologist, however, wants to know about things from the standpoint of Africans as agents. This means that all things are not within the purview of the afronographer, just as the economist does not seek to apply his or her methods to physics. Using afronography, the Africologist wants to be able to discover, through direct methods over a period of time, some particular answers to human problems. The aim of the afronographer has to be to cope with the persistent distortions of the African presence in the world. So my follow-up question is, number one, is it a science? And then number two, is there, obviously he talks about restrictions. When do we know how far we can go with afronography? And when do we know to pull back and maybe consult or use another form of methodology or science to get the answers that we need?
Okay, so yes, afronography is a science.
Okay.
The fact that it involves a step-by-step process. I don't know if. Okay, so define other professionals.
Just like Melefe Asante said that an economist would not go into. He wouldn't. What did he say here? An economist does not seek to apply his or her methods to physics. In other words, it doesn't apply into another realm of a discipline. So when you know when afronography is not going to give you, can you apply afronography in everything, or is there limits, or whatever? I guess that's the question.
So if African people are involved in whatever the endeavor is, whatever is going on, then afronography applies.
Okay.
So I don't see where it wouldn't apply if African people are involved, because we're talking about the human agency aspect in terms of whatever African people are doing in, it could be physics, it could be accounting, actuarial science, anything that African people are involved in, as an Afrokenographer, that can be studied and applied, and human agency of African people will be or may be determined.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. I just want to get a better understanding.
Sure.
Beautiful.
Okay, so I'll go to the next question. You served as the first female president of Afrocentricity International, located here in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania chapter. Tell us about your time and experience serving, and tell us about the organization for those who don't know about it.
So, let me do the second part of that first, all right?
Okay.
So Afrocentricity International, which you can reach at diabucam.com, DYABUKAM.com, supports the economic, cultural, and educational elevation of African people in an effort to create cultural consciousness. Its method is Afrocentric and Pan-African, participating at the national and international levels in the creation of an advanced cadre of individuals whose aim is to bring into existence an African Renaissance. So its members are committed to do all that they can to encourage the rise of African consciousness and the creation of the United States of Africa, in order to give back to Africa its greatness and sacredness. The motto of the organization is unity is our aim, victory is our destiny. So may each one in the world be free from oppression and free to exist on their own terms. For if a few try to oppress the majority and try to suppress it, insanity and violence are bound to be present in the world. That's what we have. We have insanity and violence in the world. Afrocentrists, in the spirit of Ma'at, seek peace, harmony, justice, order, balance, and truth. So Dr. Amamazama is the Per-Act International. Dr. Beneficence Asante is the international representative. And you can also look up Afrocentricity International on YouTube. Plenty of videos available where they are sharing about what's happening or has happened with Afrocentricity International. So I served as the first Shanuti, or president of Afrocentricity International, Philly, PA. It was an empowering time for me to serve in this capacity. Afrocentric leadership involving study and activity with Dr. Amamazama and Dr. Beneficence is always, for me, serious and rewarding. I find them both highly knowledgeable and consistent in their worldwide efforts to think about and speak in favor of, as well as act on behalf of African people. This is what I also apply my efforts towards. The most rewarding part of being a Shanuti of AI, or Afrocentricity International, Philly, PA chapter, was to engage with African leaders of Afrocentricity International organizations worldwide. I was honored to serve and engage with African people of like minds from Guadeloupe, Haiti or Haiti, Paris, Germany, Colombia. It was about 10 of us, and they were like local chapters in their areas. I know that there are more chapters available now, and we are all in contact with one another via social media, and that work is being done. I want to quote Araminta Ross and Harriet Tubman at this point, because we cannot always let everyone know and see what we're doing, okay? Because we know that there are, so-called forces out there that want to thwart the efforts of what we're doing. But I'm honored to say that Afrocentricity International is one of the real organizations out here that is really doing the work. They always give the perspective of supporting African people. When they do their press, I live for their press releases, because whatever is happening with African people around the world, they always give that African perspective, like, you know, and a lot of things that are happening with African people, you know, we don't necessarily hear about in this country, even though we have so much access to information or media. But we have to remember media is controlled, and it is propagandistic in this country.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You?
Go ahead.
Okay. That reminds me of what Baba Malima Barudi says all the time about being centered.
Yes.
And how our organizations have to be centered. And how that nuclear center has to be only with people that are absolutely trusted.
Yes.
And I go back to the Afrikanography, where you have to vet your people, know exactly who the warriors are,
right.
the ones that can be trusted. And your point is well made. Yes, we cannot let everybody know what we're doing. It's very, very important.
That just made me think of our good friend, Dr. Takai Kilimanjaro's. He had wrote a book called Survival Organization, and he breaks down organizational structure, and essentially the overall is just how does a African-centered organization, how it should perform, the inner and outer workings, and how it survives. But also, Veggie, back on your comment, my experiences going up to Beneficence Institute. I've gone up there several times, and it's, in my experience, the only place I've ever gone where I can actually sit in on a lecture, build with the people, and not pay nothing. But I always donate, obviously, because I feel like we should support institutions like that. But if a lot of people are not aware of the organization, they should find out a little bit more about it. Definitely support it. Definitely support his works, because he's been doing it for a long time. I've met him personally. My experience with him has been always good, and just reiterate once again, it's the only place I've ever walked into where it's just like, all right, come in, sit down, and and listen to the information and build. So I met a lot of good people in the process of doing that. So I was actually quite surprised to find out that you were the first female president. I didn't know that much. When I came across you and your book, I didn't know that much about you or your background. I just knew you had the book. The title of the book obviously grabbed my attention. So I said, okay, obviously we're all about African-centered education. So I said, let me check out this book. There's not a lot of people talking about this book that I know personally or that I've seen on social media, so I found it very imperative to do that. And it's very interesting to know that you served as the first female president, so I definitely was intrigued by that, so I felt it was necessary for people to know that.
I served as the first president of Afrocentricity International Philly chapter.
Okay. Oh, first president.
Not just the first female
president. President.
Yes.
Okay.
Female, shout out to my sisters, my queens.
Okay.
I was the first president of.
Let's say it again. The
first
president.
Just a little bit changes.
So we're gonna need to take that aspect out of it.
I'm female too, of course.
I was
the first president of Afrocentricity International Philly PA chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, I was honored to study and develop under Dr. Amanazam and Dr. Beneficence. They do some powerful work.
Yeah.
They are worldwide. They are global in their efforts. They are local too. And now that there are some young ones running the organization, the Philly chapter now, so they've been doing the Malcolm X pilgrimage. In addition to having their annual convention in different parts of the world. They've been to Brazil, South Africa, of course Ghana, Haiti. You know, I mean, their work is worldwide, and they walk their talk. Dr. Amazama, Dr. Malafi Ketia Sante, they walk their talk. You need a model to model yourself after. These two scholars who are scholar activists.
Okay.
So in addition to them being scholars, they are active about their scholarship.
It's good that you note that they're scholar activists,
Yes.
meaning that they're being proactive. They're not just what we said earlier. They're not just talking the talk. They're walking the walk. It's easy for people to say, "This is what we need to do. This is how we should do it," and I'm going to sell you the book how we should do it. But then it's like, well, where are they at? You know, nowhere to be found. So it's important for us to see people like them out building, getting amongst other groups of Africans throughout the world, and really putting the information out for the people so that we can grasp it and opening the doors.
Yes.
And, you know, when I see him over in the continent and building with different and various peoples, that's opening the door for us to communicate and whatever we need to do with other groups of African people. So I appreciate his works a lot.
Yes.
And like I said, it's very interesting. I never knew that about you. So we are very appreciative of that. So next question is, how important is it to implement rites of passage to the youth, especially the female youth? Okay, are there any programs you were a part of geared towards females' rites of passage for the youth?
So it's really unfortunate that we live in this place called Philadelphia that has a growing African female incarceration rate, like that no one talks about.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's so funny. One of my students posted a video, and she was confused, and I said, "Yeah, I'm confused too, but this is why, you know, it's so good to have rites of passage, because we have to guide our young people, male and female, to help them comprehend their responsibility as a part of the African family and existing in the gender in which they are born. You know, that's very important. You know, so it's extremely important to implement rites of passage for African youth, especially African females. The unfortunate rise in incarceration rates among African females across the country, and Philadelphia in particular, is evidence of the necessity of forms of transition that will lead to transformation of African female girls into African female women. The Black African families continue dissolving as a result of unstable households, some with one or the other gender of parent. Many unstable African households are unstable because of incarceration, mental instability, and just overwhelming poverty. One or both parents are incarcerated, or trying to find my way here. Okay, I put the page backwards. Okay, under some kind of incarceral jurisdiction, meaning electronic monitoring, probation, or they are experiencing recidivism, you know, where they're in and out of jail.
Yeah.
Just in and out, you know.
Yeah.
So I continue to walk my talk as a kind of African woman that I like to see greater numbers of within our neighborhoods. So first, I've written a claim, which has age grade statements, see Appendix K, that I highly recommend for parent usage to remind and allow African youth to state who they are as a part of the African family. You know, we have to tell our children and place them, you know, where they belong. That's part of being a parent, you know. So I have led African female development sessions in my community in the past. Currently, I belong to an African female African African Traditional Religion Study Group. My Mountain Time Sisters Stay Risen. I engage with a vegan potluck collective to remind myself of the need to change my addictive eating habits. And presently, I volunteer with the Sankofa Artisans Guild in the making of reusable pads for African females in Gambia and Kenya. I'm also advocating for the availability of these products for African females to use in this country in an attempt to lower the occurrence of fibroids in African women resulting from usage of chemicals and plastics in feminine products. That a lot of us don't, they have these chemicals that are harmful to us in these products that we are putting close to ourselves intimately and inside of ourselves, and it's not good for us. So those are some of the things that I'm doing, and I pretty much I move on to wherever I'm needed and wherever I feel like I can contribute.
Very good answer. You mentioned Appendix K, and I immediately turned in the book.
The age grade statements.
The age grade statements.
Yes.
And you have it from 71 above, which is Babalutu. And then you have 41 to 70, which is Mbuta. And then you have 13 to 25, which is Belisi.
26 to 40.
Oh, I'm sorry. 26 to 40, which is Mbuta Belisi. And then you have 13 to 25, which is Belisi. And then you have 7 to 12, which is in 20? In 20. And then you have 1 through 6, which is Banat. Now, when we talk about rites of passage, I believe that kind of age group would be more so between, what would you say, in 20 and Belisi, which is that 7 to probably 25-year-old range?
Yes.
So I want to take a brief moment to kind of read some of the stuff you have here.
So let me just say that this is from Nwali Mubarudi's Iya a Warrior's Character book, and he told me, he did tell me who, this is in his book, but this is not necessarily his. I forget the scholar that he told me he got this from.
Okay.
But just want to, make sure scholars get their recognition.
Baba Barudi.
Yeah, Baba Barudi, And Asante Sana again for the kind things that you said, wonderful, powerful things you said about ACCLAIM. I appreciate love that you have read it and are sharing it with your networks.
So I will just start with Belisi, which is 13 to 25, which is really that age where you're going into puberty, life is changing, you're trying to find out more about the world, you're coming out of childhood. So it says, we are warriors, builders in training. We are spiritually healthy, and we have an African concept of divinity. We commit ourselves to continual study of the ways of our ancestors. We form complementary relationships in preparation for marriage and having children. Let me say that again. We form complementary relationships in preparation for marriage and having children. We commit ourselves to fitness, health, and survival training. We respect our male and female peers in our actions and our speech. Okay? We learn from Mbuta Belisi how to challenge oppression. We strive to create positive media images that reflect and respect the values and culture of African people. We commit ourselves to study and to use our knowledge of our story to create and build an African community. So that's very good, because as a parent myself. I have a daughter, and I know it's going to come that time where she's becoming a teenager, and it's good to have principles like these to help reinforce the things that I've been teaching her. And more importantly, we mentioned rites of passage because me and Nku, we talk about rites of passage a lot, and we feel that it's imperative to start implementing it into our communities. And for me as a father, obviously my daughter has positive females surrounding her, but I feel that it's necessary for her to go outside of the home, outside of her immediate family, and to also see positive female role models. So that's why I always feel and talk about rites of passage. And even if you look at today, and you see the things that are going on, and you talk about high amounts of female incarceration. So we have to begin to combat that. We have to begin to, how do we not get to this point? So we're not just dealing with it as it comes, but we're doing preventative maintenance. How do we gear the children? We talk a lot about male rites of passage, but female rites of passage is just as important because, as you said, we're starting to see high levels of female incarceration and various different things that is affecting the community in context to our young females. I appreciate everything that you said in your participation with dealing with female issues, because sometimes females always say it's more male-centered. Why don't we talk about female rites of passage? Why don't we talk about things that affect African sisters in the community? So I felt we felt it was very imperative that we asked you that question, and not only ask you the question, but for the people that's watching and listening to get out in the community, start rites of passage programs. Summertime is perfect because the children are out of school, and they're looking for people, positive role models to latch onto. You talk to a lot of the youth, you find out that they get in trouble just because they're bored, and they're seeking attention, and they want attention, and they want people to kind of, bring them to the side and say, let's do something constructive with that energy and time. So so I won't go through the rest, but Appendix K is in the back, and it starts at page 176. For the listeners, we want you to get the book, and if you reference this part of the recording, Appendix K is on page 176. Okay, so our next question is, the Afrocentric Creed is suggested to be used by teachers and principals as a way to discipline students. Student behaviors are evaluated by examining their actions on the prism of the Afrocentric Creed. Please expound on this point.
So I want to say that in ACCLAIM, all of the appendices are recommended as sources of instilling African value systems in African youth. All of the appendices are derived from African knowledge bases. And this also is a reminder that Afrocentric Instructional Leaders includes wazazi or parents, elders, teachers, principals. It's not just teachers and principals. So all Afrocentric Instructional Leaders must first familiarize themselves with this knowledge. So when students have a query in reference to the material, the instructional leaders will have a well thought about answer that makes sense to the African youth. Further, Afrocentric Instructional Leaders must be prepared for more queries related to the initial one. And that's good, because then that means that the student the young person is thinking about what you have said to them so far. And then they are internalizing that information, and they are also incorporating into what they already know and what they are experiencing in terms of their life, you know, at that present. Consistency in answering queries from African youth is mandatory, as any inconsistency will throw them into a marginalized, confused state, leaving them open to the lies that persist about African people and our contribution to the human story. So if you're inconsistent in any part, you know, like if it's something that you don't know, you tell them, I don't know, I'm going to find out, and I'm going to come back to you and we'll talk about this some more, and you make sure that you follow through, you find out what's going on, and you come back to them and give them more information. So in the case of the Afrocentric Creed, it has been adopted by scores of urban schools and become identified as one of the rituals of the Asante Afrocentric curriculum infusion model. Student behaviors are evaluated by their actions on the prism of the Afrocentric Creed. So when the student displays behaviors that are the opposite of that listed in the Afrocentric Creed, they are guided forward into the circle from which they step out of to reinforce their African identity. And that's going to happen because, you know, you got all of this coming at them from every which way. Yep. As soon as they wake up in the morning, you know, and so you know that's to be expected. So the reinforcement of their African identity has to be something that we who are comfortable in our own African identity, we have to guide them in that. We have to nurture them in that way so that they also become comfortable in their African identity. Their life person as an African in whatever stage of life they currently exist, and that they are encouraged to continue onward to fulfill their destiny on this realm. So, you know, that's real talk. Like, you know, you have to talk with them about being in this physical realm, and you need to have that metaphysical conversation with them as well. You know, so you have to comprehend all of that, you know.
Well, what I love about all that is that, as I, you know, as we intimated, and as you clearly stated, that it's a scientific method, really. And, you know, it's just like you have to have the methodology to understand where you're going, how to evaluate these children, how to evaluate these educators. It's all part of the plan. You know what I mean? You got to have a plan.
You got to have a plan.
You got to have a plan.
And it's okay that sometimes, guess what? You're not going to fulfill that plan for that one day, you know, but at least you have a plan that you can go back to and look at and say, well, okay, I didn't do that the way I needed to do it. Let me revisit it. Let me change some things. You know, you know, you make it happen. You make it work. You know, but the idea is to keep yourself focused and determined, and everything's going to work out.
Alrighty. So, in your book, you expressed that the children, on page 52, that children can become robots in the European educational system, and you were referencing the great ancestor Asa Hilliard, and more specifically, you used a quote found in one of his chapters in Loco Parents or Retrieving Responsibility that highlights that point. Let me read it real quick. Here it goes through the training process. Because of the child's, and I'm on page 52 in the claim, because of the child's special education, the child accepts training and confuses it with education, which is critical awareness. Because it is dependent, it can never challenge the master or bite the hand that feeds the child. Because none of the decisions about training or education can be made by the child's parents, family, or community. And because the child can only agree or disagree with what is provided, the child becomes a living, breathing, highly skilled, and quite intelligent robot. That's heavy.
Yes.
That is really, really heavy.
Yes.
Expand on that, and what role do CB schools, because I know you had you know, some experience in CB schools, how are they playing offering relief from this paradigm, this particular paradigm?
So, Asa Hilliard, my eye cable. he notes that the possibilities for good parenting are really tied to cultural and historical grounding. Now, you know, you could be a parent and not be culturally and historically grounded in the life stories, experiences of the people from which you come, African people. And that would be unfortunate because when you get into these school settings, you know, they can take you somewhere where you shouldn't be. So African youth will do what they need to do to please their parents for the most part.
Yes.
They do this mainly out of love for their parents who brought them forth and guided them into this realm called life. Retrieving responsibility is exactly why Wazazi or Afrocentric Instructional Leaders, which I remember I said that's parents, that's teachers, that's principals, that's elders, that's older siblings, all who are involved in sharing, having an interchange and exchange of knowledge with African youth. They must control the knowledge and information in which African youth are exposed. It's like, you know, if your children are watching TV, you know, you monitor those programs. You know, they have access on the internet. You know, you put a filter on it. You know, and even in doing all of that, you still going to have them come to you and ask you about things that you might not have been ready to discuss with them. But guess what? When they ask the question, you better be ready to discuss it with them. You know?
Exactly.
So such involves having answers, sharing the sources of your answers, and consistently clarifying miseducation, misinformation, and disorientation as it concerns African people, our life experiences, and life stories. The Council of Independent Black Institutions, or CB, advocates for schools identifying as African-centered and Black institutions. CB's position statement, as printed on page 27 of ACCLAIM, defines Afrocentric education as the means by which African culture, including knowledge, attitudes, values, and skills needed to maintain and perpetuate it throughout the nation-building process, is developed and advances through practice. African youth will not become robots if they are living and existing in the life experiences of their own African ancestors and elders. Doing such is continuing the life cycles of African people, allowing us to live onward forever and ever. So our children, the only way our children become robots is because they are programmed to say and do things that are not of beneficence, that are not the best, the ultimate, the optimal best thing for them, you know. And so, you know, they become robots because they're just spewing out things that they're told to say and or do. You know, we see this all the time in these so-called reality TV shows where, you know, it's supposed to be unscripted when actually they're scripted, you know. So, you know, we have to be careful about the information that we expose our youth to. And even in being careful, they're still going to be exposed to it in some way, shape, or form. And you as their guardian, parent, their guider, their leader, you know, you're going to have to engage them about whatever they're asking you about. You have to know the answer. There's no way. Like you have to know the answer. And then when they don't comprehend or they're having a challenge comprehending what you're talking about, they're going to come back and ask you more questions. And remember, that's a good thing. And they're coming back and asking more questions. That's good because they're thinking about it, you know. And so ultimately, they may agree or disagree with you, but even if they disagree with you in the end, like as they get older, you know, but at least they know that, okay, well, this is my parents' position. Yeah. You know, I don't necessarily agree with it, but this is my parents' position. And sometimes they might not agree because, again, they haven't experienced what you have experienced in life in terms of age and their just general life experiences for African people.
Yeah, I think the more important part is that you get them to engage.
Yes, get them to
engage. It's disengaging going on. I think you're ahead of the game.
Yes.
Where you have a child that's responding to these this programming that they're being subjected to all the time in media and then with music and everything else. They are moldable. They're nothing but basically a mold that hasn't been molded by the African-centered researcher, teacher, parent yet. So as I explained to earlier in the interview, where we have a people that don't understand why we don't feel like we are fulfilled, why there's something missing. And in this way, we give them at least something to fill in, even if they answer or question it, even if they question it. The fact is that you're putting in the void something that is of value that they can, if they don't value it now, they'll value it later.
Right.
And that's the most important. The engagement is most important.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would veggie back on that too. Engagement is important, but it's also imperative that we encourage the children to be critical thinkers, to question stuff.
Yes, yes. Questioning is good.
A lot when I came up, our parents was like, don't, whatever I say is that, don't question nothing.
Don't question anything.
So a lot of people, and I talked to a lot of people in my age group, we grew up afraid to question a lot of things because we was always taught this is how it was taught, that's what it is, don't question it. Obviously, I was hard-headed, so this is why I'm here today. But when it comes to me now being a parent, I realized I had to reverse that way of thinking, that paradigm, and I teach my children to think critically, to question stuff. It's okay to question stuff, and hopefully I have the answer to their questions. But if I don't have the answers to their questions, then one, I would take it upon myself to find out the answer, give them the answer. Or if I feel like I can't process the answer, then I'm going to take them to someone who I feel who can give them the answer that has a little bit more understanding than I have, and in which I can reciprocate it to them. So I definitely feel it's imperative we have to begin to teach the children to think critically, question things, question it again. Is this answer a fact? Is it more of a theory? It's a hypothesis. That's going back to talking about scientific methodology, and we have to begin to teach our children those things so that they can progress and that they can be the brightest thinkers, be competitive. Very good answer, but I just wanted to add that.
Good answer. Good addition.
Now, when we go to number 10, I think we kind of covered that already. But I'll do 9, and then you can finish up with 11.
Okay.
Dr. Adjua, you break down explicitly what the ACCLAIM model is and how it should be employed. Your key points, and you actually bought the poster, like you said, you had the posters done.
Yes.
And are these available to anybody?
Yes, the posters are available with hemmymason.com.
Okay.
Yep.
We'll make sure that contact information is on the video.
Yes.
And so anybody who wants to get the poster and obviously the book.
Yes.
Matter of fact, you should get both.
You're going to read the 7?
I'm going to do it right now. That's
Okay.
part of the question. And then of course leadership, teachers, principals, etc. So the 7 points is African worldview, and in the middle you have African worldview. So obviously all these other elements of ACCLAIM has to be centered. That has to be centered. The African worldview has to be the ultimate center of philosophy.
Yes.
And then number 2, Afrocentric Instructional Leader is aware of the African worldview. Number 3, Afrocentric Instructional Leader accepts the African worldview. Number 4, Afrocentric Instructional Leader practices the African worldview through Afrocentricity. Number 5, Afrocentric Instructional Leader utilizes intergenerational cultural transmission of the African worldview with students, parents, and facilitators in the entire school family. Number 6, Afrocentric Instructional Leader implements policies and procedures that encourage, motivates, and demands the uses of the African worldview. And then number 7, that completes the circle around the center of African worldview would be Afrocentric Instructional Leader, expands the network to guarantee usage of the African worldview and the education of the African. Okay, so Dr. Adjua, take us home on that, and then as you do that, can this concept be employed on the family unit level with the parents?
Okay. Okay. So definitely. So remember, I also include Wazazi, or parents, elders, and older siblings as African-centered instructional leaders. African-centered instructional leaders is not limited to teachers and facilitators and principals or administration in schools, because remember, a lot of our children are now being homeschooled. I think Dr. Mazama did an excellent article recently on as well on the increase in the number of African people in Philadelphia who are homeschooling their children. So yes, the concept can be employed on the African family unit level with the parents. Not only the parents, the grandparents, the godparents, the older siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, and of course you want to vet everyone, because you have to be careful about who you expose your children to, and you want to keep them safe at all times. So yes, that can happen. Yes.
Okay. I think I covered kind of question 10 when I asked the earlier question.
But I did.
Oh, you want to finish up? Okay, go ahead.
I did want to add to that that if you are an Afrocentric instructional leader, who I define as parents, godparents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings, I don't want to say mentors.
No.
Yeah. People who
we do Jegnas and Sebas.
Sebas, yes.
Yeah.
If you are in that position within African youth, you want to make sure that you comprehend that it's not enough to know information about African people. Hey, everyone knows that, So you have to be able to know it from the past in order to apply it to the present and allow it to nurture for our continuing future. So if you identify as African, then you should have a dedicated, committed, unwavering allegiance to not only African culture, but also the African people. So the above is some of what African-centered scholars like Ahmed, Carruthers, Hillier, Shujaa, Asante, Mazama identify as cultural ammunition. You have to prep our children. They have to have cultural ammunition. All disciplines and all professionals have African origin, but we can explain phenomena, and we have explained phenomena over many years and eons now. It's the distortion via outright lies and misinformation of the related facts concerning the African origins of knowledge that hinders its truth, all of which stems from the so-called domination and control of said truths. So when John Henry Clark talks about knowledge being taken over, or just distorted in a sense because of the people who are so-called in control of it. And so this is why we advocate we have to tell our own stories, write our own books. We should be starting right now, like in your families, like doing a family tree with your child. I love Naeem Akbar's when he talks about the African concept of self, because he has 4 tiers of information in that, and that's something that you could do with your young children. Right. Even your teenagers, you can do that. Do it with yourself, because all of you are generational, and so each African concept of self will look different. Right. And so it's kind of like a game you could play. You could use it for discussion, to help your children and family members know of each other and know the names of our African ancestors and elders. That's it. Sorry. And so, it's very, very important that we have a concept, a who we are, and also who we are connected to as African people.
All right, so to add to what you just said, when I seen your model, it made me think of when we talk about Sebas Malimo Baruti. He wrote a book called Centered.
Yes.
And in the book, and me and Mku, we actually taken his course that he did on the surrounded by the book.
Very good
Centered.
course. Yeah.
Very good course.
Excellent.
But he talks about the circle within the circle. And then when I see in the middle of your circle, which is the center, and you have African worldview, the groupness, sameness, commonality, cooperation, collective responsibility, interdependence, group survival, and one with nature. And when I think about his book, and I seen that, and I think about how I lead my life and trying in being African centered, and I think about my circle within the circle, and then seeing your model for ACCLAIM puts it that much greater perspective on his work, because I see you reference his work a lot in your works, and I go, wow, like it's like a mirror. Somebody just come in and wipe in the mirror. Now I see things more clear. Now I have an even broader understanding on the ACCLAIM model, his book, African Centeredness, as well as some other books that has been written. So I'm very impressed with the model. I've read your book, front cover to back cover. And as a parent, once again, I feel it's imperative that you take this model and that we begin to be proactive with the model, as well as things, if people haven't read Baba Baruti's African Centered book, it's definitely a good book that you should have. And this is going to be on my list of books that everyone should have on their bookshelf. There's a few select books that I feel that everyone should have on their bookshelf, and this is definitely one of them. So I just wanted to add that to it.
That's it.
So I'll let Mku take us away with the last question of today.
No, I got something to say after that, so I want you to take the last question.
Okay.
And I want to add a comment after you do the last question.
Okay. All right. So I'll do we're beginning to wrap up the interview. So our last question for Dr. Adjua is, the question is, you have a storied and rich career that is both stellar and exceptional. Can you please expound on your work with the Black Communities Action Committee, SUSU? Why is cooperative economics imperative in the African community?
So BCAC SUSU, right, I'm a former manager trainee of the BCAC SUSU. Shouts to Ms. Monica Wright, who is a meticulous, diligent manager of the BCAC SUSU, Black Communities Action Committee. Since its inception, she has kept records, encouraged membership, and expanded the BCAC SUSU to the point where there are offers to purchase it as a money transfer business among Black people. Ujamaa, or cooperative economics, are imperative for and within the African community. We need one another as business partners, customers, traders, and investors. Our value to one another is important and necessary for the building of financial wealth among one another. We've tried the money is green idea, and that green money keeps going into the coffers and communities of people who are not us. We have to do better for the future, which is our children. As well, we owe it to our foremothers and forefathers before us to continue doing that which is needed to sustain and maintain our existence on this planet.
Okay. All right. So now I'll let Kufu get his last words, and Dr. Adjua, you can close us out. But I want to press home the point that education has been in the African model since early ancient Kemet.
That's right.
and when you look at mental nature, Brother Jacob Carruthers' book,
Yes.
Mental Nature, the Divine Speech, he explains it very well in here. We also talked about Asa Hilliard. We have references from his book, Sebas, and of course, Jacob Carruthers. I know you had,
Yes, all of them.
I know you love this man.
All of them. Yes.
Intellectual Warfare.
Yes.
These are books that you want to get. Obviously, of course, ACCLAIM. Make sure you get that with the poster.
Yes, sir.
However, in Jacob Carruthers' book, Divine Speech, I want to show you guys how this education thing, the science of education, this magical elixir that gets us drunk, this mental nature, is about educating our people, because you can't educate without properly communicating. And the communication has to be pure, it has to be from the heart, and it has to be based on the principles of Ma'at,
Yes.
as you already said already. So in the brother's book, Mental Nature, Divine Speech, chapter 3, page 173, we are focused on the governance in and through speech. Indeed, governance is a major function of mental nature, mental nefer, for example, good speech. The teaching of Kemet is that governance begins with education. Education is the instruction of those who do not know about the speeches and wisdom of the ancestors. Instruction is a process of teaching good speech through good speaking. The individual educated through good speech becomes a good speaker. Such persons are necessary for good governance. Thus, governance is the cause as well as the recipient of good speech. This probe into the wisdom of Kemetic governance. You see, you keep hearing this word governance, which is what our teachers, our leaders, have to be good governors, have to employing good governance, has focused on the education of public officials, future pharaohs, and the nation as a whole. The training of public officials, as per the instructions of Peter Hotep, is the epitome of scribal education. In the instruction, the basic wisdom of education is set forth. Education is intergenerational transmission of the Creator. For example, mental nature, divine speech. This is truly the divine conversation, the educational process.
Yes.
What you said, Kufu, about the reciprocity. All of these things, the engagement, divine conversation. It is through this conversation that the framework for governance is set forth through such traditions as the Wasarian drama, which established the principles of legitimacy and power. The concept of Hor, which symbolizes the ideal of pharaohship and nationality, was a special emphasis of this framework. Peter Hotep, as a prime minister, sets forth the ethical standards that guide the attitudes and practices of the governors. The process of scribal education to which he speaks was open to all ranks and was the chief mode of social mobility. Thus, the teaching was not only the teaching for the entire elite officialdom, but also for the citizens as a whole. So we see that this wasn't something that was taken very lightly. It was important for officials, kings, noblemen, scribes, priests, and the entire nation as a whole, in order for them to be as one, or one accord through the principle of Ma'at, to anticipate and participate in this divine conversation. And I'll close that out as my closing comments. That education is something that's not new, and we know how great ancient Kemet was for thousands and thousands of years. We can recapture our greatness again. We can recapture it again. Sure. Good, I'll let you in for that, Dr. George.
Very good. I just wanted to expound on why cooperative economics is imperative in African community to me. And it really should be a no-brainer when we think about it. We support those who are doing positive and productive things in the community when it comes to businesses. And in return, they do the same thing, which builds a better community. Here we go with the word reciprocity again, right? And that's why I felt it was imperative. Even if you look at where we're doing this interview today, we're doing it at West Philly Produce on the top in the community room. And I'm a big, I preach cooperative economics, so I have to lead by example when we do that. And I look at the owner and CEO of West Philly Produce and A&W Community Solutions, and he's out here in the community, and he's giving back to the community.
Yep.
So I feel we as a people should give back to him. And he doesn't ask for money and donations. He says, just come support my business.
Mm-hmm.
Practice cooperative economics. Come by, get produce, buy a smoothie.
What's the address again?
It was 18 South 62nd, 62nd Street.
Just so you come down and buy yourself a smoothie and a salad and the fruit salad and everything else that you need there.
Right. And we also, 2 years ago, we sat in this very room and we interviewed Arnett Woodle.
Yep.
And it's a very good interview, and you can check that out on raisingawarenessgroup.com. Just to end my comment off, practice cooperative economics, support businesses in your community, people that look like you, people who hire people that look like you, support those businesses, and make sure that not only we support those businesses, but make sure those businesses also support the community that's within it, not just swallowing the financial reward. But make sure that you see the owners out there helping within the community and helping build the community. So go back to that word reciprocity.
Right.
Make sure it's a reciprocal thing. So I'll let Dr. Adjua
Close us out.
So definitely we cannot do this without cooperative economics. We should practice all of the Nguzo Saba, which is also in the appendix of ACCLAIM, the Nguzo Saba. We should practice that amongst each other, amongst one another. We should teach our children African proverbs. There's a lot of stories in African proverbs and a lot of wisdom and knowledge in African proverbs. So we need to practice Umoja, unity, Kujichagulia, self-determination, Ujima, collective work and responsibility, Ujamaa, of course, the cooperative economics, Nia, purpose, Karumba, creativity, Imani, faith. One of the things that I've incorporated into my cell phone is, you can do events. You can go into your events calendar, and you can put the Nguzo Saba principles in there. Every day you'll get a reminder.
Okay.
And so in addition to the reminder, I also use, I put the African time, which is also an appendix in ACCLAIM. Appendix O and P. I have the African language weekdays.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
And I have the African language months of the year. So you can put the days of the week in a Khan or Kemet in your phone. And so not only will you get the reminder about the principle for the day, but you'll also get the African name in Kemet, or if you want to use a Khan, of the day of the week, and you can put the months in there as well, and also in each ACCLAIM book, I also, can I see your book? I forgot the name was. Each ACCLAIM, like as soon as you open ACCLAIM, you learn right away. So not only do I autograph the book to you, Medu Necher from the great Teofilo Benga was my African language, and working on a PhD. And so every book is numbered, and it's numbered in Medu Necher. So as soon as you open the book, you get the lesson in Medu Necher. The number is in there, and I autograph the book to you. So get your copy of ACCLAIM, which you can get at wehemimesu.com, WEHEMYMESU.com. It's also on the back of the book. And you could just look up Iya Adjua. I'm Iya Adjua on all the social media, Facebook,
Right.
Instagram, Pinterest, YouTube, and Twitter. And you can find me. You can call me also if you'd like to at 484-427-2999. 2096. I also but in addition, I'm an education consultant, researcher. I'm a cultural researcher, warrior activist. I do research in academics and genealogy. I'm a grant writer, guest speaker, craft shop coordinator, workshop interactive session leader for parents, educators, and students, along with African female development transformation sessions or rites of passage, and much more. So it passes pages ages 7 to 17. So, call me. You need me, let's consult, let's build, let's do things together. Make sure all parents, you should have a copy of ACCLAIM.
Make sure you get a copy.
In your library. You should have this book in your library. And all schools that identify as African-centered should have mandatory copies for all their facilitators and parents that are teaching African children.
Gotcha. And we'll have all the contact information, obviously, at the bottom of the video. So
yes.
You'll see all that.
All right, everyone. It's been a very good interview. We're very appreciative of Dr. Adjua's time today. Once again, I am Kufu Aku Mental Hotep, co-founder of Raising Awareness Group, alongside with my other co-founder, and sometimes pain in the butt, Mku NZ. Today is July the 6th, 2019. And we just want to say Shem Hotep to everyone. Shem Hotep.
Shem Hotep.
Hotep.